All right, welcome to another deep dive. And today we're tackling something a little different, actually. We're taking a deep dive into a piece on, get this, 14 signs of divine restoration. It was requested by, well, you, our awesome listeners.
That's right.
This piece is all about recognizing when things might be turning around, even after a loss. What really struck me was the hopefulness of it all. It's like, even when things are tough, there's this chance for a comeback, a fresh start.
Yeah. It's a really interesting idea. And, while the source is faith-based, these signs, they can actually be viewed through a lot of different lenses. Like think about personal growth, resilience, the way our communities lift us up when we're down.
Yeah.
It's about renewal, however you define it, really.
Exactly. And let's be real, who hasn't felt lost at some point, right?
Yeah.
It could be a job, a relationship, maybe even a dream that kind of fizzled out.
It happens to all of us.
Yeah. So, listener, as we're talking about this, what's coming to mind for you? What kind of loss are you connecting with? Take a moment to think about that.
Now, I do want to be upfront. The source leans pretty heavily on Christian beliefs and stories from the Bible. But we're going to explore these signs in a way that makes sense, even if that's not your background.
For sure.
Think of it like this. These are 14 patterns that people throughout history and across cultures have seen as signs of positive change. Like they're on the horizon.
Okay, I love that. So, to keep things organized, we've grouped the 14 signs into 4 themes. Okay, we'll start with relational restoration. Think about those making up moments, mending broken bonds.
Right. And the first sign in this category is return of the prodigal children. The source tells the story of Maria, a mother whose son, John, comes home after years of making bad choices and being estranged from the family. She welcomes him back, no questions asked.
It's a classic story of forgiveness, right? But instead of just retelling it, what can we learn from it? The psychology of forgiveness is fascinating. It's not just about the person who messed up. Maria, by forgiving, she frees herself from all that anger and resentment, too.
Absolutely. Holding on to grudges, it can be like a poison. It eats away at you. Forgiving, on the other hand, it's often the first step towards healing, not just for the relationship, but for each person.
Yeah. It makes you think, listener, have you ever had to forgive someone who really hurt you? Or maybe you were the one who needed forgiveness. What was that like? Emotionally, I mean.
Another powerful sign in this group is reconciliation of relationships.
Yeah.
The source uses the example of Anna and Beatrice, these childhood friends who drifted apart. It's like misunderstandings and resentments built up over time.
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Years later, they reconnect. And through honest conversations and a genuine desire to heal, their friendship blossoms again.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And what's so powerful about this story is that it shows us reconciliation is a choice. It's about actively working through past hurts to rebuild something that's valuable.
That's so true. And their story also highlights something super fascinating. Their renewed friendship actually inspires others in their community to do the same thing. It's like this ripple effect of forgiveness and reconciliation that spreads outwards.
Whoa.
And it creates this more harmonious environment for everyone.
I love that. Okay, so we've got prodigal children returning, friendships rekindled, but there's another sign in this relational theme, reestablishment of peace. This one I think will resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a big one. The source tells the story of Carlos, who lives in a home that's just filled with tension and arguments. It's constant. But Carlos, he finds inner peace through his faith. And gradually things start to shift in his family too. They find unity and love, and it's through these shared spiritual practices.
It's so interesting because it's not about Carlos forcing his beliefs on his family. It's about his personal transformation, inspiring that change. His commitment to peace becomes contagious. It's this reminder that sometimes focusing on our own inner state can have this ripple effect, and it actually impacts our relationships.
Absolutely. It raises an important question, listener. Think about the relationships in your life. Are there any where peace feels elusive, like it's just out of reach?
Yeah.
If so, what role could your inner peace play in shifting that dynamic? This isn't about being passive. It's about recognizing that sometimes our personal growth, it can influence the whole environment around us.
That's deep. And it makes me wonder, looking at those 3 signs together, forgiveness, reconciliation, and peace. Is there like a connection? Could one be a prerequisite for the others? Something to ponder, listener?
Now, we could talk about relational stuff all day. Forgiveness is huge E, but this source covers so much more. Let's move on to signs of spiritual renewal. I think you'll find this super interesting.
Let's do it. And I have a feeling some of these might surprise you, listener.
Okay, so we're moving into spiritual renewal now. And the first sign here is restoration of joy. The source focuses on John, remember him? The prodigal son. Well, he's back with his family, but he's battling some serious depression. And it's through reconnecting with his faith, praying, and really engaging with his community that he starts to find his way back to joy.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the whole miracle aspect of these stories, but what's the takeaway for our listeners? What can they learn from John's experience?
Right. Well, I think John's story really highlights how crucial community support is. And having a sense of purpose, especially when you're dealing with mental health challenges, that's vital for well-being.
It makes sense.
And it's not just about receiving that support, though. It's also about giving back, John finds even deeper joy when he starts serving others, volunteering at his church and things like that. It's this reminder that sometimes when we focus outward, it helps us heal internally.
It's like that saying, when you light a candle for someone else, your own flame burns brighter too. I love that.
And speaking of light, the next sign is all about renewal of hope. The source tells the story of Laura, who's just facing setback after setback. Imagine job losses, relationship troubles, just one thing after another. And she's lost all hope. But then, little by little, things start to change for her.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, think about the psychology of hope, right? It's not just sitting around waiting for good things to happen. It's about actively choosing to believe in a positive future, even when things are tough. Laura really participates in this renewal. She joins prayer groups, engages in spiritual practices, and she even uses her experiences to help others who are going through similar struggles.
Right, and this ties into that concept of resilience, our ability to bounce back from adversity. Laura's story shows us that while faith can definitely play a role, taking action and connecting with other people, those are crucial steps in cultivating hope, no matter what you believe in.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, are you ready for this? The next sign is spiritual revival. So picture this. A church that's fading, right? People have lost their passion, attendance is down or just stagnant. But then a group of leaders decides, hey, we got to do something about this.
They get together, they pray, they study scripture, seek guidance, and slowly the energy starts to shift. New people start joining, others come back, and there's this renewed sense of purpose. It's like the church itself is being restored.
Now, here's the thing, listener. Whether you're religious or not, have you ever been part of a group, a team, or even a family that felt stuck, like in a rut? This story really shows the power of collective action and intention. It's a reminder that sometimes all it takes is a small group of dedicated people to spark a revival, to breathe new life into something that felt lost.
Yeah. And moving from the communal back to the individual, let's talk about resurrection of dreams. This time it's Clara's story. She had to give up her dream of becoming a doctor because of financial and family pressures. Years later, though, those doors open again. She gets some unexpected support and the chance to go back to school.
It's amazing. It's like that dream which she'd kind of buried deep down, it suddenly comes back to life. Makes you wonder, listener, how often do we let our dreams die because of external obstacles, Clara's story is a challenge. It makes us examine those buried aspirations. Is there a dream you've put on hold that might be worth revisiting?
And, just like with the other stories, there's another layer here. Clara's journey back to med school, it's intertwined with her spiritual growth. She leans on her faith for strength and clarity. It's like fulfilling our true potential is sometimes linked to nurturing our inner selves,
Okay, so we've talked about reigniting joy, hope, and even entire communities. But now let's get into the nitty-gritty. Those signs of material and physical restoration. This is where things get really interesting.
First up, we have multiplication of what remains. The source tells a story about Joseph, a farmer facing a terrible drought. I mean, he's lost almost all of his crops. But instead of just giving up, he prays for a miracle. And you know what? The grain he does have, it miraculously multiplies. He ends up with a bountiful harvest.
Yeah, it's a classic faith-rewarded story. But let's think deeper, listener. What did Joseph actually do? He doesn't just sit back and wait, right? He fasts for guidance, and then he shares what he has with others. It's like, even when we're hoping for a miracle, we have to do our part, make smart choices, act with generosity,
It's an idea that resonates across so many cultures and philosophies. Think about the concept of right action in Eastern traditions. It's about aligning your actions with a greater good, and often that's when we see abundance come into our lives.
I love that. Okay, so what other material blessings are in store for us? Tell me more.
Okay, let's talk about restitution of lost goods. The source gives us the example of Ricardo, a businessman who loses everything in a failed business venture. He's at his lowest point, but then what happens? New opportunities pop up, and his financial situation starts to turn around.
It's like the universe is saying, hey, you took a hit, but I'm here for you. But here's the thing, listener. It's not just about Ricardo getting his money back. He goes through a spiritual transformation, too. He becomes more compassionate, more generous, and uses his experience to help others who are struggling financially.
It points to this theme we've seen before, right? Restoration isn't just about getting back what you lost. It's about becoming a better version of ourselves through the process. Like the loss itself was this catalyst for growth.
It really makes you think. Have you ever experienced a setback, listener, that actually led to positive change in your life? Maybe losing a job that forced you to reevaluate your priorities, or even a relationship ending that pushed you to work on yourself.
Yeah, those can be powerful moments. Speaking of things we don't want to lose, the next sign is recovery of health. This story is about Peter, who gets diagnosed with a serious illness. The doctors give him very little hope of recovery. But his faith, it never wavers. He prays, he finds comfort in his beliefs, and incredibly, he starts to heal.
It's tempting to just call it a miracle and move on, but I think there's more to it. Think about the placebo effect. The power of belief has actually been scientifically proven to influence healing. And Peter doesn't just sit around waiting, he adopts healthier habits, seeing it as working with a higher power.
And this connects to the mind-body connection, which medicine is recognizing more and more these days. Our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions, they have a real impact on our physical well-being. Peter's story shows us that whether it's through faith, positive thinking, or just sheer willpower, tapping into that mental strength can be a powerful part of the healing process.
Okay, so we've had multiplication, restitution, recovery. Are you sensing a pattern here, listener? It seems like divine restoration is often about more than just getting back what you lost. It's like leveling up in the process.
Exactly. It's about resilience, growth, and using our experiences to make a positive impact on the world. Now, are you ready for a story about rebuilding?
Bring it on. Tell me everything.
All right, the next sign is reconstruction from ruins. Picture this, a community that's been devastated by a natural disaster. Homes destroyed, lives upended, just utter chaos and loss. But instead of giving in to despair, they come together, fueled by their faith and a shared determination to rebuild.
I'm already picturing the montage. What happens next? Do they get some huge influx of donations?
Well, they face huge challenges for sure, but they start seeing signs of hope everywhere. Donations do pour in, volunteers arrive from all over, even the weather seems to cooperate with their efforts. But it goes beyond just rebuilding the buildings. They're rebuilding their lives, their sense of community, and their faith.
It's such a powerful example of collective resilience, listener. Think about times when your community has faced a hardship, maybe a natural disaster, an economic downturn, or even just a shared loss. What role did coming together play in overcoming those challenges?
It speaks to the incredible capacity for resilience that we have as humans. When we band together, support each other, share a common goal, we can overcome almost anything, even the most devastating obstacles.
Okay, so from rebuilding physically, let's shift to personal aspirations. What's next on our list of signs?
Prepare yourself for this one. It's about dreams. Return to the promised land. We hear the story of the Martin family. They lose their home because of an economic downturn. It's heartbreaking, but they hold on to their faith, praying and leaning on their community for support.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. So do they get their house back? What happens?
Well, they get something even better, actually. They have the chance to buy a new home, one that's even bigger and better than the one they lost. And they see it as this sign of divine faithfulness, a fulfillment of God's promises.
Wow. Talk about an upgrade.
Uh-huh.
But you know what I find so fascinating? It's not just about getting a bigger house. The Martins use their new home to host community gatherings, Bible studies, prayer sessions. It's like they're taking this blessing and turning it into a blessing for others.
It's beautiful, isn't it? Such a great example of paying it forward. They're not just receiving, they're actively creating a space for connection, growth, and spiritual nourishment. It challenges us, listener, to think about how we can use our own blessings, whether they're big or small, to make a positive impact in the lives of others.
We've covered resurrected dreams, rebuilding from ruins, finding a new promised land. What other signs point towards that feeling of, like, deep fulfillment?
Well, remember, Carlos, the one who found peace in the middle of all that family chaos, that sign, reestablishment of peace. It's not just about external circumstances, it's also about finding that inner calm that we all crave.
That's so true. The source describes Carlos living with constant conflict, arguments with family, tension at work, this feeling of inner turmoil. But through prayer and connecting with his faith, He finds this sense of tranquility he never thought possible. It's like he's tapped into this source of peace that transcends all the chaos around him.
And here's the key takeaway, listener. It's not about just passively accepting things. Carlos is actively working towards peace. He's seeking guidance through prayer, finding comfort in scripture, and he even inspires his family to join him on this spiritual journey.
It's like he's not just finding peace for himself. He's creating this ripple effect, and it's touching everyone around him. Reminds us that our inner state can really influence our external reality, right? If we cultivate peace within, we can help create a more harmonious world around us.
Absolutely. And remember those friends, Anna and Beatrice, who drifted apart? Well, that sign, reconciliation of relationships, pops up again here. And it's not just about romantic relationships. It's about mending those broken bonds with friends, family, anyone.
Yes. Their story shows the power of taking that first step towards reconciliation. It takes courage, to reach out, to be vulnerable, and to be willing to let go of those past hurts. But the reward, a renewed friendship, and a sense of closure that can be incredibly healing.
And their story highlights something we often overlook: the importance of shared values and beliefs in building strong relationships. Anna and Beatrice find common ground in their faith, which helps them reconnect.
Yeah, it makes you think, listener. What shared values or beliefs are at the heart of your closest relationships? Are they based on shared interests, a common purpose, or even a spiritual connection? It's worth reflecting on, right? Thinking about those foundations that keep us connected to the people we care about most.
We've covered so much already, from finding joy and hope to rebuilding communities and even getting back what was lost. Are you ready for the final sign, listener? This one is all about the power of grace.
Hit me with it. I'm ready to be amazed.
Okay, so the last sign on our list, the final one in this exploration of divine restoration, is reception of abundant grace.
Ugh.
This one's about Roberto, and he's a man who's really wrestling with past mistakes. He's feeling unworthy, like he can't shake the guilt and the shame, and deep down, he believes he just doesn't deserve any love or forgiveness.
Man, that's so relatable, isn't it? I mean, that feeling of just not being good enough, carrying around the weight of those past burdens, it's almost universal,
Yeah.
So what happens to Roberto? Does he have like a sudden realization? Or maybe he meets someone who gives him a pep talk?
Well, it's more subtle than that. It's like he starts experiencing grace, but it's in these unexpected ways. Like maybe it's through acts of kindness from strangers or moments of clarity where things just seem to click into place. And there's this growing sense of unconditional love. It could be from a higher power or even just from within himself.
It's like he's finally opening himself up to receiving that love and letting go of all that self-judgment that was blocking it. But how does he connect this to the idea of grace? Especially if someone listening isn't religious, how would they understand that?
That's a great question. Think of grace as this like unearned gift. It's not something you have to work for or that you deserve. It was just given. In Roberto's case, he starts seeing all these positive things that are happening as signs of this abundant grace, and it's washing over him, cleansing him of all that guilt and shame he's been carrying for so long.
I love that image. It's beautiful. It makes me think of that saying, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Maybe grace is kind of like that light, right? It finds a way in, even when we feel broken.
That's a great way to put it. And what's really inspiring about this story? Roberto doesn't keep it to himself. He actually joins the support group and shares his struggles and everything he's learned. And he dedicates himself to helping others who are going through similar things. It's like the grace is flowing through him now, and it's touching other people's lives.
Man, I'm getting chills again. It's just such a beautiful example of how our own healing can ripple outwards. And it can inspire others too, right? So we've gone through all 14 signs now. Relationships, spirituality, material stuff, dreams. It's a lot to process.
It is. And, as we've been talking, I keep thinking back to that conflict I had with a colleague. It was early in my career. Remember how we just butted heads constantly over our research styles?
Oh, yeah, the dating nerd versus the big picture thinker. Classic clash of styles. But what made you think of that now?
Well, looking back, I realized that whole experience kind of mirrors a lot of the themes we've talked about today. I mean, we had to reconcile. Eventually, we figured out a way to work together effectively. There was that reestablishment of peace in our working relationship. And honestly, even a kind of spiritual revival, if you think about it. Our collaboration, once we got past the conflict, it sparked all these new insights and ideas that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Whoa, that's wild. It's like these 14 signs aren't just these abstract concepts, They're woven into our lives, showing up in ways we might not even realize.
Exactly. It reinforces this idea that restoration can take so many forms. It's not always about getting something back that you lost. Sometimes it's about growth, transformation, and finding a deeper meaning in your experiences, whatever those might be.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to walk away with? What's the big takeaway?
I think it's this. Even in the face of loss, heartbreak, setbacks, there's always this potential for renewal. It might not look how you expect, and it might take time and effort, but that possibility, it's always there.
It's not about waiting around for a miracle, is it? It's about making that choice to believe and then taking action, moving towards it.
That's it. So listener, what steps can you take even today to bring more healing and wholeness into your life? What needs restoring, and what actions will support that process?
Powerful questions. And listener, we want to hear from you. What resonated most from this deep dive? Have you experienced any of these signs of restoration in your own life? Share your thoughts, your stories. We're all in this together, you know?
Until next time, keep diving.
And keep believing in those amazing comebacks. See you next time.